Good evening. This is Beth from Around the Table Yarns. Tonight is Sock Club for 2026. This is our first meeting. Tonight is January 5th, and we are going to be starting the Rye Socks from Tincanknits. So the Rye Sock is a free sock pattern from Tincanknits. It comes in fingering weight, it comes in worsted, and it comes in DK. I can show those to you here on Ravelry. So the Rye sock is the one that I'm doing, and this is a free pattern with the download directly from Ravelry. And you can also download their app and use it for free as well. So this is a great opportunity to try out the Tincanknits app. We're really excited about having this available to us. What did I press? Okay, so that's the Rye sock in the fingering weight. There's also the DK weight and a worsted weight. And the worsted weight is also suitable if you wanted to make like a slipper. All of the patterns come in newborn, baby, toddler, a child, adult, small, medium, and large. And you'll use different amounts of yarn for the different kinds of share, stop share. Can I stop share? Stop share. Okay. So, oh, I think they changed it again. You are scared. Stop share. There we go. Sorry, takes me a second. Every time I use Zoom, I swear to God, they have changed the interface. Currently, nobody is on with me, so I'm going to pause as I need to, as I'm recording so that the recording isn't an hour long if I can possibly avoid it. But I just want to go through some of the aspects of the pattern and then through the first steps of what we're going to be working on for Sock Club for this first session. All right, so here's my pattern, and Snuggly Simple Socks from Tincanknits. The pattern is written. I just wanted to go over the fact that we will be meeting on January 5th. That's today, February 2nd, and March 2nd. These are all the first Mondays of those months, and this is all for 2026. Happy New Year. So over here, we can talk about our sizing first. The first and most important thing on any of the patterns is they have a sizing paragraph, and the sizing paragraph starts with the finished cuff or foot circumference, and that is given unstretched. So it's hard to see when my hands are on there, but they're gone clearer. So for the baby, the toddler, the child, the small adult, the medium adult, and the large adult, they give different sizes. And you'll notice that these are pretty distinct sizes. And so the issue came up today in class because the number that we wanted was between 7.25 and 8. So what do? Well, the first thing is to understand why you're using an unstretched circumference around. So if I took my foot and I measured it around the widest part, which is near the toe, but not where there's a bunion and not on the toes themselves. So the widest part of your foot, and you would want to stand with both feet on the ground. So my little stick figure has both feet on the ground, and you would want to put a tape measure around the widest part of your foot so that you can tell how many inches around the widest part of your foot is. And when you have that measurement, you can check it on both feet, on the left foot and the right foot. That measurement is usually pretty close for adults. And I'm going to go ahead and pin me. Right. I'm spotlighted now. That measurement is generally the same as the leg measurement. And it is usually the same from foot to foot, but it might be a little bit different. If you have a difference between your left foot and your right foot, then you want to either take the average of them or pick the smaller of the two, so that it will fit well on both feet. Um, I'm just going to make up a number. Let's say that this circumference around on your foot is 10 inches. You do not want to make your sock 10 inches around. And the reason is if it fits exactly around as the sock is worn and stretches, it will get larger and it will move around a little bit in the shoe as you're walking. And when it moves around, it wears more than it ought to. So we actually want our socks to stretch to fit our feet by about 10%. In other words, if your foot is 10 inches around, then the actual circumference around that you want to pick, and I'm just making these numbers out, is 90% of that. So you want to multiply your actual circumference around by 0.9. And in this very simple math case, that would give me a 9-inch circumference, which is way bigger than any of the feet that I'm going to do. So it's maybe not a great, but it's close to this 8.75. So if you had a 10-inch foot, you would want to make the largest size. So that's part of what's going on with these sizing, is that the sizes given, there are 7 different sizes given, but you may not be exactly one of these sizes. So what do you do? If you're not exactly 8.75, you're 9, you could make the 8.75, but potentially consider using slightly bigger needles. So that is one way to adjust between 8.75 and 9 inches is you could go, especially in the smallest size needles that are being used here, you could go up to a 2.5 needle or a 3 to get the gauge that you need. So a combination of measuring your foot, so you want your actual measurement, you want to multiply the measurement around your foot circumference by 0.9, and then you want to take that number and find the closest number in the finished cuff or foot circumference here. And then if you need to go up or down, the next adjustment you can do is by changing the needle size 1 or 2 sizes, depending on how much you need to change this. So for example, my foot measurement that I want is around 7.5. So I decided that I'm going to use the smaller size, the 7.25 size around, and I'm going to go up a needle size. So that's a decision that you need to make unless you get the exact finished cuff circumference when you do your math. And that would be wonderful, but not everybody does. Do you need to use the leg or the foot measurements? No, for sizing purposes for a sock, it's really the foot circumference that's the most important one. So the question is whether or not you get gauge. And as much as I like working with gauge swatches for many, many projects, I don't like working with gauge swatches for socks. And the reason is at the beginning of your sock, you're going to cast on 36, 40, 44, 52, 60, 64, or 72. And even for the largest sizes, 72 is not that many stitches around. If you're making a DK sock or a worsted weight sock, you're going to have a significantly smaller number of stitches. So the biggest number that they come up with is 72. And I gotta say, that's not so big for a swatch. You could do a swatch of 72 stitches to good effect. So what I recommend doing for a sock is to start it, to do your ribbing and go into the leg at least an inch or two, and then try it on. If it's too big or too small, then you can go up or down a needle size or go up or down a size and recast it on. But my recommendation is to use the first sock as your swatch. Any questions? I don't have anybody really except Kim who's here who knows how to make socks, so I'm not sure that she's going to have any questions for me. Um, let's see. It does require two stitch markers, although they don't tell you to place them, which I thought was really funny, at least in the place that I would have placed them. So that's kind of amusing. If you download this, the Magic Loop method, the Tincanknits app, every time I use my fingers, I make everything go out, and the in-depth rye sock tutorial, all of these are live links on the pattern itself if you're on the internet. So if you download this, you should be able to get to all of those live links. So let's just cover the construction of the sock. We've got the direction of knitting is indicated by the gray arrows here. So we'll be going from the top of the leg down to the top of the ankle and then over to the top of the foot. So our direction is top down. We're going to use a loose cast on for the cuff, and the cuff is going to be worked in the round in a knit one, purl one rib. So this is knit one, purl one. And then we're going to work the top of the sock, and there is a garter stitch band that goes down the top of the whole sock all the way to the beginning of the toe. So this is going to be the front half of my sock, and this is going to be the back half of my sock here. The back half of the sock will be done all in stockinette on the leg and the foot. But the top of the sock, or the instep of the sock, will be done in a combination of garter stitch and stockinette from the cuff down to the top of the toe. And that means that we will be alternating between knitting and purling between the markers on the instep or the top of the sock, on the top of the foot. We're going to do the gusset and the heel turn in our second class. So our goal for this class is to look at the cast on and the leg getting set up for this pattern. And then I'm going to demonstrate what we need to do the heel flap, which is this portion. So by the end of this session and ready for our next session on February 2nd, I want us to have completed the cuff, the leg, and the back of the heel, and be ready to do the heel turn and the gusset. And then you'll work on your foot. And then the last class will be shaping the toe and working the grafting of the toe. So that's our plan. So here we go with the pattern. And it starts, they do use two different sizes of needles. And I'm using one that's in between the two sizes that they use because I like it for my socks. So I'm using a 1.5. I'm pretty comfortable with that. I am going to be checking once I've gotten past my cuff that it is, I'd like this to come into focus. So they do say to use smaller needles. So we had a conversation about this. I just like using one size needle for my socks. If I really want my cast on or my ribbing to be tighter, then I do a knit one, purl in the back loop, or knit one through the back loop, purl one. So if you use one needle size and you want tight to get a tighter rib, you can do a twisted rib. Twisted rib, and that would be like knit one through the back loop and then purl one instead of just knit one, purl one. And that will give you a little bit more, a little firmer ribbing. And then they have you change to larger needles. Alternatively, you can use smaller needles and larger needles, or alternatively, you can just do your cast on and ribbing with the same size needle as your foot. I think it is a matter of personal preference. For people whose legs are a little bit heavier and maybe don't want to have such a tight cuff, using the same size as the size for the sock, as the main part of the sock, is fine. So if you have trouble with your socks falling down, you might want to use either smaller needles or the twisted rib. And if you don't have that issue or you don't make a very long sock, you may want to just use the same size needles. So I'm gonna cast on, because I'm doing the fingering weight sock in the smallest size, I'm gonna cast on 60 stitches. And they do have, it does say to place a marker and join for working in the round. I will be doing this magic loop. So I will not be placing a marker. I use my tail as my indicator of the beginning of my round. So let's get to that. I just want to show you, this is the beginning of my other sock. I do work both socks at the same time in Sock Club. So this is the one we started this morning. And I want to point out, this is done on my 1.5 needle. I have not changed size. It still draws in on the ribbing. I did not do a twisted rib. So between the ribbing and the stockinette garter stitch portion of the sock, you can see that there is a difference, that it does draw in here. And here it'll lay a little bit flatter. The other thing I want to point out is that I did a much looser cast on. And the way that I did that was very, very simply by using both needles to cast on around. And that gives me a little bit of extra stretch. One of the biggest problems with hand knit socks is that no matter how stretchy the cast on is that you use, it can still feel a little bit constricting as you put the sock on. And so using 2 needles to cast on around will help you out considerably in making that a little bit stretchier. So I just want to show you that I've got this nice stretchy cast on, and using 2 needles does elongate it. All it does is make that stitch longer or taller. So it's not making it stretchier, it's just making it bigger. But it does not look unattractive at the top of your sock. So I think it's important to look at that and say, oh, that looks okay. Because if you didn't like how it looked, maybe you wouldn't want to do that technique. But I think that extra little bit of stretch in the top of the sock is really important. So how did I do that? I use a long tail cast on, and I use circular needles that are at least 32 inches long. So I'll just show you those. So a 32-inch long circular needle. I like the ChowGoo because I find that the join is very, very smooth. I like the metal ChowGoo because the tips are nice and pointy, and I have a cat who likes to eat my bamboo needles, and so they're always snagging on things. So I like my metal ones, although the same cat likes to eat the cords of these and then they snag. So who knows? He just hasn't caught these yet. And we're going to do a long tail cast on. We had classes with Kate Atherley recently, and she was talking about cast-ons that she likes. And she essentially said that she likes when she does a long tail cast-on to do a slip knot at the beginning. I didn't used to do a slip knot at the beginning. I used to just start with a loop around my needle, and I'm listening to Kate and I'm making a slip knot now. When I measure out enough yarn to do my cast on, I like to think of, even with fingering weight, I like to think of this being about 30 stitches. So an arm length to me is about 30 stitches. So I always do 2 arm lengths when I'm casting on for a sock of around 60 stitches. I'm going to have plenty of yarn, but I'd rather have plenty than have to redo. So at that point, I make a slip knot, and I'm going to slip it over the end of both my needles held together. Many times when you're doing a long tail cast on, they tell you to put one end over, so the cut end or the tail could be over your thumb, and the end that's connected to the ball is over your pointer finger. And you're going to make all the extra things out of the picture. This up a little. So you're going to make, you put the slip knot over the pair of the two needle tips. So that I just have this bent in half. I have both stitches with the first stitch on. And I have the tail over my thumb, and the working yarn, the yarn that's attached to the ball, is over my pointer, and I pull down to make a V. So to do a regular long tail cast on, you would touch your needle tips to the base of your thumb and run them up. Touch your needle tips to the tip of your finger and run them down, and then again touch the tip of the thumb and run it down through the loop. That makes a new stitch on the needle. Put your finger on that new stitch, drop your thumb out of the loop, and then use the thumb against the front strand to just gently bring the stitch to completion. So I'll show you that again. Making a V, go up the thumb, down the pointer, down the thumb. There's my new stitch. I put my finger over that stitch while I drop my thumb out, because you see how it kind of swizzles up. And then I use my thumb, and I also move the needles away. So my right hand is holding the needles and I move it away. And at the same time, I'm pulling on that front loop to make a nice, comfortable stitch. Don't want to make it too tight, don't want to make it too loose. And you can keep doing that. So that's the normal long tail cast on. But I also like to do the German twisted, which is a variation of the long tail cast on. And the variation does this. Instead of going up, you go around and down into that stitch. Then you go up and over. So again, touch the tip of your pointer and come down. There's my new stitch, but the one on my thumb you can see is twisted. See the X there? So I can either bring my needles through the tiny triangle that's nearest them, which I always find a little fiddly. And then you can put your finger there, drop your thumb, and bring up the stitch. And it creates an extra little twist. So let's do it again. So normal position, I go all the way around and down, up to the tip of my pointer and down. Now, another way that you could think about doing this, instead of just coming through that tiny triangle, if that bugged you, you could come forward of this strand, the strand that's on the outside of your thumb, and then into the loop and down. So I kind of just opened up that loop. And I still end up bringing my stitch through the tiny triangle. Again, put your finger on it, drop it off, because look at how it twizzles, and then gently, not tightly, finish the stitch. So that is the German cast on, the German twisted cast on. And I like it because that extra twist right here creates a little bit more elasticity. So between using both needle tips and the German twisted cast on, it's also called the Old Norwegian cast on. I find that that gives you a little bit extra, but it can be somewhat tricky to learn. And I want you to notice as I'm doing this, it unravels the strand that's over my thumb. So it's not a bad idea to just give it a little bit of, once you've made a few stitches, give it a little love, just like run your finger down it and let it retwist before resuming. And we're going to make our, whatever your size is, however many stitches you're supposed to cast on. Like I said, I'm doing 60. So I'm going to pause the video while I finish those. So I'm finishing up my last couple of stitches. 9, 10. It's always important when you've done it. So I have lots of yarn left over and I don't need that much, but before I cut it, I'm going to just double check my stitch count and make sure I have the 60 stitches I want. So I count by threes, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, 27, 30, 33, 36, 39, 42, 45, 51, 54, 57, 58, 59, 60. Oh, I have 63. Well, that's 3 extra. So I'm just going to drop those 3 off. There we go. Now, these are on the end of my needle and it's folded in half. So I need to push one needle up and pull one needle back. And now it's just on the one needle and on the cable. I'm going to count to the halfway point of my stitches. So 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, 27, 30. I'm going to make space there. So this is the magic loop method. If you were doing double points, you would want to divide your stitches in half for the instep and in half again for the bottom of the foot is generally how I do it. So you would do 30 stitches and then 2 sections of 15, and you would slide these onto your double pointed needles from one double pointed needle usually. So you'd cast onto one needle and then put 15 on the first one, 15 on the second one, and 30 on the last one. The 30 would be your instep or the top of your foot. Or you could do 30 and then 15 and 15, however you like to divide it up. So there's my stitches, there's my midway point. So for magic loop, I bend there and pull my cable through. At this point, I like to lay it down on the table. And what I want to see here is, first of all, I want my working yarn. I always imagine this like a rectangle. So when I lay it down on the table, I always think of this as a little rectangle. And the nearer needle, the needle that's closest to my body, so my body is here. So this is the nearer needle and this is the further needle. And I'm stretching out between the 30th and the 31st stitch. And then my working yarn and my tail are both at this end because I was using a magic loop or a long tail cast on. So what I want to do is I want to identify the tail and move it out of my way. I want to identify the working yarn and lift it over the needle like that. So it's moving away from the needle. So they're both moving away from the needle. And I want to position the front needle into those stitches. So I'm pushing the front needle into those stitches. And the, and the back needle, I'm going to pull out so that I can turn it. So the magic loop is actually 2 loops and it looks kind of like Mickey Mouse ears. There's one loop on the left-hand side and there's another loop on the right-hand side. So when I do this, there's no twists. What I do now, I want to get my tail out of there altogether. Okay. There's my tail all the way away. So I've taken my working yarn and I've laid it from where it is at the bottom of this stitch over the cable of the needle. I've pulled my back needle out. So this was here. And I've pulled it out and I've turned it ready to knit into the first stitch on the other needle. So the needle that doesn't have any stitches on it. So I've got those kind of pinned down. And what I want you to do is pinch them together as you pick it up. So you're pinching the cable and those stitches so they can't get screwed up. They can't get all twisted around. And your working yarn is coming out from the bottom of that stitch and laying over the cable, and you're positioning this needle to knit that first stitch. So you can get a little bit more slack. You don't want to lose this loop on the left side, and you want to make a loop on the right side. And you want to put this needle into the first stitch. I love how it's just sort of out of, I want you to see that this yarn is attached at the base of that stitch, and it's going to come around this needle. So I just wrapped it counterclockwise around that needle, and I'm holding it against that cable. So I'm sort of elongating the stitch in the front, but really holding it close to this last stitch that I cast on, and then come through, make that stitch, and pull tighter on that stitch than any other. So I'm really firm. You can see that I'm really holding, there's lots of tension. There's no slack at all on my working yarn. And I've made this as small a stitch as I can. And I find that that minimizes the gap that can happen right there at the beginning, but it doesn't make it go away entirely. Then I'm going to bring my yarn forward and I'm going to do my purl. And I'm going to knit one, purl one across. Now, if you were doing through the back loop, if you wanted to do the twisted rib, when you go into your knit stitch, you would go into the back loop of the knit stitch and work it that way. I'm not doing a twisted rib, so I'm just going to work it normally. And then you just continue along. I'm going to pause the video and get to the end of this side. So I'm at the last two stitches of this side. Ooh. 4, 8, 10, 12, 13, 22, 6. No, no, I'm not. 7. I think there were 30 or 60 stitches on there. Uh-oh. I'm going to have to redo this. Anyway, you get to the end of this side, and I'm going to have to recount my stitches, but you have your working yarn attached to the last thing you did, and this needle has come free. So what I want you to do is use your working yarn as a guide to change position so that, again, the working yarn is attached in the upper right-hand corner of that little rectangle. Okay? Make sure everything is lined up and there's no twists. Pinch them together. Push the front needle, the loose needle, into its stitches. Lay your yarn above the right needle like that, holding your sides together. Pull the back needle out, ready to knit this first stitch, and then pull it together tightly, firmly, so that that needle is right up against that cable, and make that first stitch. And then continue in your ribbing. When you continue in the ribbing, you can resume normal tension. It's only that first one that I'm worried about having too loose a connection. But you can see that's a nice tight connection. I have the wrong number of stitches on there, so I have to go back and I have to redo this, but that's okay. That's my problem, not yours. And then you'll go to the end of the row. Now, remember how tight I made it at the beginning, just like I did it here? I want you to see what happens when we get to the end of the row, because it's going to be loose again. So here we go, getting to the end of the round. Still plenty to go. But as you're handling it, as you're knitting around, and this can happen whether you're on double pointed needles or doing magic loop, as you come to the end of this first round, no matter how tight you were, when you get there, there's going to be slack, and that's okay. So make sure you keep your tail out of your way, get to the end, and it's just a function of how this sets up that it looks like there's a big gap between the sides. This is So look at that. It looks like there's an inch between my two sides. So just guide again to the right. So you're turning to the right. I try and use my working yarn to guide it so I don't get tangled up. I check to make sure they're not tangled, and I move the two needles together, push the front needle into the stitches, lay the yarn above the back needle, and pull the back needle out ready to work that first stitch. And again, you want to be firm and tight on that first stitch. And what you will find is that every time you do it, the slack goes away a little bit more. So if you're very firm and then you resume normal tension from that point onward. So I'm only ever tight on that first one, but then I resume normal tension for the remainder of the stitches of that round. And that is joining in the round with magic loop. It is not dissimilar to how you join in the round for double points. And you can see that even though there was a big loose place there, I've joined it back again, and now it doesn't really show a gap. Okay. Like Julia Child, I've started my other sock. This one does have the correct number on it. And if you are looking, you can see the garter stitch section that started right here. I'm going to grab a couple of markers. This garter stitch section is determined on the pattern. So it says in the pattern to work your cuff now for the adult sizes. Hello, let's focus, please. For the adult sizes, for the kids, the baby sizes, it's 1/2 inch. For the larger children sizes, it's 1 inch. And for the adult sizes, it's 1.5 inches. I won't do 1.5 inches even if you make me. I won't do it. So I only ever do about 1 inch of ribbing. And I count the rows and then I match my other sock to the first one. I did not change to larger needles. I'm staying on the same. And I am doing the first size in bold. So I like to circle those as I'm going. The only number that changes here is this, and this is different. So you circle the numbers for your size, and you're going to knit 6, and then purl, in my case 18, and that's just the first 24 stitches of my whole round. And then I'm going to knit the remainder of that round. So the remainder of that half of my stitches and all the rest of the stitches are knit to the end. So you've got knit 6 and then knit 18. That's 24 stitches. So I will then knit to end for my size. That's going to be knit 36. Apologize that won't stay in focus. So only on the setup round do you purl. In the following round, you knit all. And then round 2, you repeat the knit 6, purl 18, knit 36 to the end. And then you alternate these 2 rounds. So you do a setup round, then you start with round 1 as knit all. Round 2 is the the round that includes the purl stitches. And then you repeat this until, now they're calling this the cuff. I call this the cuff and this the leg. So here, I'm going to put in parentheses leg, but that includes the cuff. So if you work this until this whole section measures 2, 2.5, 4.5, 5.5, 6.5, 7.5, 8. So for me, that means it would be 6.5 inches from there to there. Or, just want to tell you, or the size you want it to be. If you want short socks, you can do it for 3 inches. If you want super long socks, you could go another inch or two. It does not have to be 6.5 exactly. It can be what you like. The only caution is, generally speaking, this leg it's the same circumference as the foot, and that is true near your ankle mostly. So if you want it to go much further up your calf, you might have to change the sizing at the top of the leg. So working between 6 and 8 inches, it's generally true that that's going to be the same size as the width of your foot. But if you have a very heavy leg, you might want to change the total length so it's shorter, so you're closer to the ankle. Or if you're going to make it longer, we'd have to talk about some alterations to the pattern to fit around your leg. Okay. Now, they don't tell you to place markers, they just have you count. And to be fair, it's visible. You can see the garter stitches. So I have done the last row. I've set this up and done the last row with the purl, and you can see them. So I know that this row is going to be all knit. And I know that when I come to the next row, I can just count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then start purling until I have 6 left. But you can also, if you want to, place markers whoop, at the beginning and end of that section. If you're afraid that you're going to botch it or forget to do it, then you can put markers on. But you should pay attention to the fact that this is not done every row. We're not purling every row. We're only purling every other row in this section. So, and the remainder of the stitches all the way around the sock are always knit. When you are done with your leg, we're going to do, hello, we're going to do the heel flap. So again, this section will be 6.5 or 8 inches or however long you want it to be, or 3 or 2 or 1. So you get your leg done, the cuff and the leg done to the length that you want, and then you're going to be going to the heel flap. And this is a section that you're going to do without me. The heel flap is on page 3 of the fingering one. And what it tells you to do for the heel flap, so you've finished the leg to the length that you want, and now we're going to knit this flap. And this flap, the heel flap and the heel turn, are both worked back and forth. They're only worked on half of the stitches. And so what I want you to do is follow along with the instructions at heel flap. And you're going to work these only over half of the stitches. So the setup for this is that you work the first half of the stitches, which in this case are the ones with your pattern. You work those and then turn the work, and this is the plain stockinette side of your sock. You are going to work in rows, not rounds. So when you get to this side, you're going to knit across and then you're going to turn and purl back. Knit, purl with a slip stitch at the beginning. So let's just see how that looks. I'm going to work across my row and then turn and work back and forth on the other side. So I'll pause the video, and when I get to the end of the round, I'm going to turn and work back just on my Actually, I'll wait till I get to the beginning of the heel flap. Hold, please. So Kim reminded me that the app is available and that if you use the app and you put in the size that you're doing, it will eliminate all the alternate sizes and just give you the information you need for your own row. And that's important. So here I am, I'm ready to work back and forth on the back of my stitches. And I just want to point out a very important thing about this heel flap. This heel flap is simplified. And the reason I'm saying that is that oftentimes when you get to the right side row of the heel flap, so what I want you to notice is there's a slip one at the beginning of the round of the row and a slip one at the beginning of the wrong side row. That's typical, and those slip stitches help us later when we're going to pick up our gusset. Don't worry about that right now, but just know that that's a really helpful thing to have those slip stitches when you're picking up the gusset later. Great. But to knit to the end is a very simplified heel flap. It is only stockinette fabric thick. In other words, there's no reinforcement being added here. So if you're used to knitting socks, if you've done socks before, you may have seen the instructions say slip one and then knit one, and then it's in parentheses, and then you repeat that to the end of that half. And then in row 2, it will say slip one and then purl to the end. In other words, if you've got my 30 stitches, slip one, knit one, slip one, knit one, slip one, knit one, you'll do that 15 times to get to the 30th stitch. And then you'll turn and you'll slip one, purl 29. Not slip one, purl one, slip one, purl one. So this slip stitch can be added if you want to reinforce your heel. It will give you a slightly thicker, denser heel, which will wear a little bit longer than a stockinette heel. So if when you wear your socks, any socks, store-bought socks, they wear out at the back of the foot, then you might want to consider doing this slip stitch, knit one, slip one, knit one, slip one, knit one. And the way that looks, the reason I stopped here to show you is that looks like this. Slip one, bloop, knit one, slip one as though to purl, knit one, slip one, knit one. So I go all the way across all of my stitches like that. And so what's happening is my working yarn is carrying, it's very hard to see in such a small space, but it's carrying across the alternate stitches. So I've worked this one, I've slipped this one, I've worked this one, I've slipped this one. And that extra layer of yarn is what is reinforcing. So if you want to try that, you can, and you would do it for each of the right side rows in the heel flap. So if they have you do a total of 18 repeats, or 14 repeats, you would do it for every one of those row ones. Okay, so that's where we're going to stop. We're going to work to here for February 2nd. And we'll be working the heel turn together on that class. So if you finish your first sock to this point, and it's not February 2nd yet, I highly recommend that you start your second sock and you get it to the same place. And that way, when we finish, you will be close to being done with both socks on the last day, which is March 2nd. So that's our first sock club of 2026. And I'm open to any questions that you might have. If you think of a question later, you can email it to me at info@aroundthetableyarns, or you can call the shop. The shop number is 216-230-9224, and we're open every day. If you leave a message on our voicemail, if you don't get somebody and you get our voicemail, the voicemail messages are left to us also in email. So even if we're home, we see that we have messages and we can respond to them. So if you're calling about Sock Club, do put Sock Club in the email, or say that you're calling about Sock Club in the message, and I will be happy to get back to you and answer any questions that you have. So next time is February 2nd. We'll be doing the heel turn and the gusset and the decreases for the gusset. And then you'll be working on the leg on your own. Sorry, not the leg, the foot on your own. And then the last class on March 2nd, we'll be doing the toe shaping, and the grafting. Thank you so much for joining me. I am so excited to be starting a new year of Sock Club. It's my favorite. I love making socks. So I had a great question. How do you know if you're on a knit row or a purl row for the section where you're doing the garter stitch? And the easiest way to tell is to pull away from the cable or the needle and look and see, do you have a little V-neck at the base? So if you have a little V-neck at the base, then you have just done a knit row. And if instead you have a little turtleneck at the base like that, then you've just purled a row.
Oh,
So
okay.
the easiest way to tell, for me, the easiest way to tell is to move it apart, stretch down. And do you easily see those V's? If you easily see the V's, you're ready for a purl row. If you easily see, and it's most easily demonstrated here, if you easily see the bumps, you've done a purl row, you're ready for a knit row.
It room.
And make sure, because especially at this stage, it can get turned inside out, especially if you lug things around like I do. Make sure
Mm-hmm.
you're looking at the right side of the fabric when you do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise you could be looking at the purl bumps and not the whatever. So you want to see that there's stockinette on the side, and that when you pull it away, that there's a row of knit. That means you're on a purl row. If there's a row of purl, you're on a knit row.
Got it.
Does that help?
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely. Almost looks like we're using the same yarn, but
Are you using Sweet Georgia?
I'm using 1918.
Oh, fun. And you
Yeah,
did the gradient?
I cheated so I didn't have to wind.
Uh, we'll wind your yarn.
I know.
All right. Everybody have a wonderful month of
You
making
too.
socks. We'll see you on February 2nd.
All right, see you then.
See ya.
Welcome, Tanya.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Yep.
Wonderful.
Bye.
Bye,
See you soon.
ladies.
Bye bye.